Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you an amazing and inspiring story. The story of George Washington, the man who became the first president of the United States and a symbol of leadership, courage, and determination. Washington was not just a leader. He was a man of strong values, discipline, and perseverance. His journey from a simple farm boy to the most powerful leader in America is truly motivational. So, let's begin this incredible journey. Chapter 1. A Simple Beginning, 1732 to 1743. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He came from a modest family, not rich but not poor either. His father, Augustine Washington, was a farmer and landowner, and his mother, Mary Ball Washington, was a strong woman who taught him discipline and hard work. From a young age, George learned the values of honesty, responsibility, and leadership. He spent most of his childhood on a farm, helping with daily tasks and learning about agriculture and business. But tragedy struck when George was just 11 years old. His father passed away. This was a difficult time, as he had to take on more responsibilities at a young age. Without much money, he couldn't afford a proper formal education. Unlike many great leaders, George didn't go to college, but he was a fast learner. He studied mathematics, geography, and surveying on his own, which later helped him in his career. Chapter 2. Learning Responsibility, 1743 to 1748. As a teenager, George had to grow up quickly. He worked hard to help his family and soon developed a strong work ethic. One of the most important things he learned was land surveying, the skill of measuring and mapping land. At just 16 years old, he got his first job as a land surveyor. This was a turning point because it taught him about the land, nature, and the importance of organization. He spent many days in the wilderness, traveling long distances on horseback, measuring land, and meeting different kinds of people. This tough life made him strong, independent, and fearless. Chapter 3. The Start of a Military Career, 1748 to 1754. By the time he was 20, George was already an experienced surveyor and a respected young man. But he wanted more. He wanted to serve his country and make a difference. At the age of 21, he joined the Virginia Militia, a small military force. His first mission was dangerous. He had to deliver an important message to the French forces, warning them to leave British territory. This journey was filled with challenges. He faced extreme cold, dangerous rivers, and even an assassination attempt. But he survived. His bravery and intelligence impressed the leaders, and soon he was given more important roles. By 1754, George Washington was already a rising military leader, ready to face even bigger challenges. Chapter 4. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763. One of the biggest challenges in Washington's early life was the French and Indian War. This war was fought between Britain and France, both wanting control over North America. Washington was sent to fight in several battles, and though he faced many defeats, he never gave up. Instead, he learned from his failures and became a better leader. His ability to stay calm under pressure, make quick decisions, and inspire his soldiers earned him great respect. By the time the war ended in 1763, George Washington had proven himself as a skilled and fearless leader. He was now ready for the next big challenge, leading his country toward freedom and independence. Chapter 5. Life after war. After the French and Indian War, Washington returned home to Virginia. He was now a respected war veteran with valuable military experience. He decided to focus on his personal life and took charge of his family estate, Mount Vernon. During this time, he married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow. She was not only his wife, but also his biggest supporter. With her, Washington built a happy and stable life. But things were changing in America. Britain started imposing heavy taxes on the American colonies. The most famous of these was the Stamp Act of 1765, which taxed newspapers, legal documents, and other goods. Many colonists, including Washington, were furious. Washington believed that the British government was being unfair. Why should the colonies pay taxes without having a say in British laws? Tensions grew, and soon, the American people started protesting. Washington spoke out against British rule and joined the fight for independence. Chapter 6. The Start of the Revolution. In 1774, Washington was chosen as a delegate to the First Continental Congress, where leaders from different colonies gathered to discuss how to fight British control. He didn't speak much, but people noticed his strong presence, leadership skills, and wisdom. By 1775, things had escalated. The British Army and American colonists had already clashed in battles at Lexington and Concord. The American Revolution had officially begun. The leaders needed a strong military commander, someone who could unite the army and lead them to victory. The choice was clear: George Washington. In June 1775, Washington was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. This was a huge responsibility, but Washington did not hesitate. He was ready to fight for his country's freedom. Chapter 7. Leading the Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1776. Washington took charge of an army that was poorly trained, had little money, and lacked supplies. But he was determined to turn them into a strong fighting force. One of his biggest early challenges was the siege of Boston. The British had taken control of the city, but Washington and his troops surrounded them. After months of planning, the British were forced to retreat in March 1776. It was Washington's first major victory. But the war was far from over. The British were powerful, and they soon attacked New York City. Washington's army suffered a series of defeats, but he did not lose hope. Instead, he planned one of the most daring attacks in history: the famous crossing of the Delaware River. Chapter 8. The Crossing of the Delaware. By late 1776, things were looking bad for the American army. The British had captured New York City, and Washington's troops were cold, tired, and losing hope. Washington knew he had to act fast to keep the revolution alive. So, on the night of December 25, 1776, in the middle of winter, Washington made a bold decision. He led his army across the icy Delaware River and launched a surprise attack on the British in Trenton, New Jersey. The enemy was caught off guard, and Washington's army won a huge victory. This boosted morale and proved that the American army could win against the powerful British forces. Chapter 9. A Tough Journey, 1777 to 1778. After the victory at Trenton, Washington faced many more battles. Some he won, some he lost, but he never gave up. One of the hardest times came in the winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge. His army had to camp in freezing temperatures with little food, no proper clothing, and many soldiers falling sick. But Washington stood by his troops. He kept them motivated, trained them hard, and with the help of European allies, his army became stronger than ever. By the summer of 1778, Washington's army was ready to fight back. Chapter 10. The Final Victory, 1781. The war continued for several more years, but Washington's patience and strategy paid off. In 1781, he made a brilliant move. He led his army, along with French allies, to Yorktown, Virginia, where the British army was stationed. He surrounded them from all sides, cutting off their escape. After a long battle, the British General Cornwallis surrendered on October 19, 1781. This was the final victory. The war was over, and America had won its independence. Chapter 11. Returning Home as a Hero, 1783. When the war ended in 1783, George Washington was the most famous man in America. Everywhere he went, people cheered for him. Many even believed that he should become the King of America. But Washington refused. He didn't fight a war to replace one king with another. Instead of taking power, Washington stepped down as the commander of the army. This was a shocking move. In history, most leaders who won wars took power for themselves. But Washington was different. He wanted America to remain a democracy. After saying goodbye to his soldiers, he returned to his farm at Mount Vernon, Virginia. Finally, after years of war, he could live a peaceful life. He spent his time farming, managing his land, and spending time with his family. But his peaceful days did not last long. Chapter 12. America's Growing Problems. Even though the war was over, America was not truly free yet. The country had won independence, but now it had to govern itself. This was a much harder task than anyone expected. Some of the biggest problems were, there was no strong government. Each state had its own laws, and they often disagreed. There was no national army. If another country attacked, America had no defense. There were money problems. The war had left the country in huge debt, and the economy was weak. Without a strong leader, America was falling apart. Many feared that the country would collapse and that Britain or another European power would take control again. The people needed a leader, and everyone knew that there was only one man who could unite the country: George Washington. Chapter 13. Becoming the First President. In 1787, leaders from all over America gathered to create a new government. They wrote the U.S. Constitution, a document that outlined how the country would be governed. But they still needed someone to lead the nation. When it was time to choose a president, there was no debate. Every single vote went to George Washington. He became the first and only president in history to be elected unanimously. At first, Washington did not want to take the job. He was tired of politics and loved his peaceful life at Mount Vernon. But he also knew that if he refused, America might not survive. On April 30th, 1789, in New York City, George Washington took the oath of office and became the first president of the United States. A new chapter in his life had begun. Chapter 14. Washington faces challenges. As president, Washington had no example to follow. There had never been a president before, so he had to set the rules for future leaders. Some of his biggest challenges were: 1. Creating a government. Washington needed to form a government from nothing. He appointed strong leaders, including Alexander Hamilton as Treasury Secretary and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. 2. Fixing the economy. America was in debt, and Washington had to find ways to pay it off. He helped create a national bank and set up a tax system. 3. Avoiding wars. Europe was at war, and both France and Britain wanted America to take sides. Washington knew that America was not strong enough for another war, so he kept the country neutral. 4. Dealing with rebellion. In 1794, farmers in Pennsylvania rebelled against taxes. Washington personally led an army to stop the rebellion, showing that the new government was strong. Even though he faced many difficulties, Washington handled every challenge with wisdom and patience. Chapter 15. Washington's second term. In 1792, when it was time to elect a president again, Washington did not want to continue. But once again, the people begged him to stay, saying that America still needed his leadership. So, he agreed to serve 4 more years. During his second term, political parties began to form. Some leaders wanted a strong central government, while others wanted more power for individual states. This caused major disagreements, but Washington tried to keep the country united. By the end of his second term, Washington had enough. He was tired of politics, and he wanted to return home. Unlike other leaders in history who stayed in power for as long as possible, Washington made a bold decision. He refused to run for a third term. After serving for 8 years, he stepped down, proving that America was not ruled by kings, but by the will of the people. Chapter 16. Washington's Farewell Address. Before leaving office, Washington wrote a farewell speech to the American people. In this speech, he gave 3 important pieces of advice. 1. Stay united. He warned against division and reminded Americans that they were stronger together. 2. Avoid political parties. He feared that parties would divide the country, creating fights between Americans. 3. Stay out of foreign wars. He believed that America should focus on its own growth and not get involved in European conflicts. Washington's farewell speech became one of the most famous speeches in history. Even today, leaders study it to understand how a country should be run. Chapter 17. Life after the presidency. After leaving office in 1797, Washington returned to Mount Vernon. He finally had time to enjoy his farm, spend time with his wife Martha, and live in peace. But his work was not completely over. In 1798, a war between France and Britain threatened America. The government asked Washington to lead the army again, and even though he was old, he agreed to help. Thankfully, war never happened, and Washington was able to spend his last years at home, surrounded by family and friends. Chapter 18. The Passing of a Legend. On December 12, 1799, Washington went out for a horseback ride in the cold rain. He caught a severe cold, and within 2 days, his condition worsened. On December 14, 1799, Washington passed away peacefully at his home. He was 67 years old. His final words were, "It is well." The entire nation mourned his death. People all over America paid tribute to him, and leaders from around the world praised his wisdom, courage, and leadership. Washington was buried at Mount Vernon, where his tomb remains a place of honor today. Chapter 19. Why was Washington so respected? Many people wonder why George Washington is considered one of the greatest leaders in history. The answer is not just because he won a war or became president. It was because of his character and values. Some key reasons why Washington was so respected. 1. He was a selfless leader. Unlike many leaders in history who held on to power, Washington stepped down twice, once after the war and once after being president. 2. He believed in democracy. He refused to become a king and worked hard to create a government that served the people. 3. He was honest and disciplined. Washington was known for his honesty, integrity, and strong work ethic. People trusted him completely. 4. He put his country first. Every decision he made was for the good of America, not for personal gain. Even today, Washington's name is synonymous with leadership, bravery, and honesty. Chapter 20. How Washington's decisions shaped America. Washington was not just the first president, he was the one who set many traditions that later presidents followed. Some of his most important contributions include the two-term presidency rule. Washington could have remained president for life, but he chose to step down after 2 terms. This later became an official rule for all U.S. presidents, the peaceful transfer of power. Many countries struggled with power transfers, but Washington made sure that leadership passed peacefully from one president to the next. The president's role. Since he was the first, Washington had to define what a president should do. He set the example for how to lead with dignity and strength. Because of Washington, America became a country where leaders serve the people, not rule over them. Chapter 21. Washington's influence on future presidents. After Washington stepped down, John Adams became the second U.S. president. Many people compared every future leader to Washington. Some presidents who deeply admired Washington include Abraham Lincoln. He looked up to Washington's leadership and courage, especially during the Civil War. Theodore Roosevelt. He often spoke about Washington's character and followed his principles of honor and service. Franklin D. Roosevelt. During World War II, he encouraged Americans to remember Washington's bravery and wisdom. Even today, presidents study Washington's life to learn how to be better leaders. Chapter 22. The creation of Washington, D.C. One of the biggest honors Washington received was having the U.S. Capitol named after him. In 1790, Congress decided that a new capital city would be built, and it would be called Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. Washington personally chose the location of the city, near the Potomac River. He worked with architects to design the city. Even after his death, the city continued to grow into the powerful capital it is today. Washington, D.C. remains a symbol of American democracy and a reminder of his incredible leadership. Chapter 23. Washington's impact on other countries. Washington's leadership was not just admired in America, it influenced people in other nations who were fighting for freedom and democracy. France, the French Revolution, was inspired by Washington's fight for freedom. Many revolutionaries saw him as a hero. Latin America, leaders like Simón Bolívar studied Washington's life when fighting for independence from Spain. India. Washington's example of leading a peaceful revolution inspired leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in his fight for Indian independence. Africa. Many leaders in African nations studied Washington's ideas while forming their own democratic governments. Washington's ideas about freedom, democracy, and leadership continue to inspire people worldwide. Chapter 24. The Washington Monument. One of the most famous tributes to Washington is the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. Built in 1848, it stands 555 feet tall, the tallest stone structure in the world. People from all over the world visit it to honor Washington's legacy. The monument represents strength, leadership, and the principles of democracy. Even today, it remains one of the most visited landmarks in America. Chapter 25. Washington's Face on Money. Washington's face appears on the U.S. dollar bill and the quarter coin. The $1 bill is the most common paper currency in the world, making Washington's image instantly recognizable. The quarter coin was chosen to honor him because of his role as America's founding father. This is a reminder that his leadership and sacrifices continued to be honored in everyday life. Chapter 26. Why Washington's story still matters today. Washington's life teaches us many valuable lessons that are still important today. 1. Leadership is about serving others. Washington never ruled for personal power. He led to help his country. 2. Honesty and integrity matter. People trusted Washington because he was always truthful and fair. 3. Hard work leads to success. Washington started with nothing, but through hard work and dedication, he became a great leader. 4. Courage and perseverance. Even when things seemed impossible, Washington never gave up. These lessons still inspire people around the world to become better leaders, better citizens, and better individuals. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.